This map shows the fractured territories of Gaul in the 57th year before the Common Era. Julius Caesar was pushing his legions deep into hostile, uncharted environments, attempting to bring these disparate tribal regions under the control of the Roman Republic. Deep in the northern territories lived the Nervii. They strictly outlawed the importation of wine or foreign luxuries, believing such comforts eroded physical courage. To them, diplomacy was an insult, and surrender was the ultimate cowardice. This diagram shows the standard Roman marching order's severe mechanical flaw. Combat legions were divided by miles of slow-moving baggage trains, isolating each unit along narrow forest roads. Gallic scouts observed this spacing, giving the Nervii precise timing to strike the stretched line. Caesar was marching into a mathematically calculated trap, engineered specifically to exploit standard Roman operating procedures. The vanguard of the Roman column finally arrived at the banks of the Sambre River. The gentle slope of the land and the quiet surrounding woods presented a deceptively peaceful landscape for the legions to halt and build their camp. Roman camp-building protocol required heavy manual labor to dig trenches and raise wooden palisades. Soldiers had to physically disassemble their combat gear, setting aside their heavy iron helmets to shovel the earth. In this exact moment, the troops were entirely exposed. Their shields remained inside heavy covers, holding wooden tools instead of swords. Less than a mile away, tens of thousands of Nervii warriors waited in absolute silence. They had woven the young trees and thorn bushes across the river into thick, impenetrable hedges, concealing their massive numbers from the Roman pickets. The greatest military machine of the ancient world had voluntarily disarmed itself directly in front of an enemy positioned to strike. The trigger for the ambush was visual. The Nervii commanders waited until the exact moment the first vulnerable Roman baggage carts crested the distant hill. Instantly, the tree line erupted. The entire Nervii force broke from hidden positions simultaneously, a massive wave of bare-chested warriors pouring out from behind the hedgerows. The speed of their descent down the hill was terrifying. They covered the open ground with such velocity that the disarmed Romans across the valley had zero time to process the threat. The horde plunged directly into the 3-foot-deep waters of the Sambre, splashing through the river without breaking their momentum as they closed the final gap. For the Roman soldiers, the sensory overload was absolute. The extreme velocity made it seem as though the enemy was in the woods, inside the river, and atop their own lines all at the exact same moment. The sheer speed of the assault bypassed every defensive protocol. A structured military deployment instantly collapsed into a chaotic fight for physical survival. The standard Roman chain of command disintegrated. There was no time to display the battle standards, and no time to sound the musical trumpet signals that usually directed the cohorts. Soldiers dropped their digging tools in a frantic scramble. They had mere seconds to rip the leather covers from their shields and strap on heavy, cumbersome gear, while the enemy crashed into their lines. The formal structure of the legions dissolved. Men could not find their assigned units. Instead, they blindly attached themselves to the very first visible flag they saw, creating a disorganized patchwork of defenders. Grand strategy ceased to exist. The battle fractured into isolated pockets of brutal hand-to-hand combat. The line held only because the muscle memory of the veteran soldiers automatically took over. The famous Roman system of warfare had evaporated. They were no longer an organized army executing a tactical plan, but a fragmented mob trying to survive a highly coordinated slaughter. This overhead tactical view shows the extreme pressure on the Roman right flank, where the 12th Legion absorbed the heaviest blow. The situation was tactical suffocation. Roman ranks were pushed so tightly together by surrounding Gauls that soldiers physically lacked space to draw their swords. The Nervii systematically targeted the frontline officers. The centurions of the 12th Legion were slaughtered, effectively decapitating localized leadership, keeping the men steady. A total rout was imminent. If the 12th Legion broke, the entire Roman force would be trapped against the riverbanks and massacred. Standard formations could no longer save the legion. The crisis escalated entirely beyond the scope of military manuals, requiring a complete break from protocol. Caesar arrived at the collapsing right wing. He absorbed the reality of the fatal overcrowding, fallen centurions, and the blind panic gripping his men. He left his helmet behind, plunging directly into the rear ranks of the terrified legionaries. Reaching the crush of men, he physically snatched a heavy rectangular shield from the hands of a retreating soldier. Shield in hand, Caesar violently shoved his way past his troops, leaving the rear and stepping directly into the absolute front line. Standing exposed before the Nervii, he called out his surviving centurions by name. He ordered the ranks to push forward and open up the spacing, giving the men the physical room they needed to finally swing their swords. When the mechanical system of war fails, leadership cannot be automated or delegated. To restore the human will to fight, the commander must personally step into the line of fire.